Three, two, one. Welcome to the Long Term. I'm Ty King, and in this podcast, we've been exploring a lot of different things over. It's been over a year that we've been putting episodes out, but like in the beginning, we were sort of starting so fresh and new, but we still thought that we had recovery itself. We knew the concept, we knew what probably needed to happen. I say new in quotations, but as we've been going through these episodes and talking to the experts, realizing, oh, we didn't know anything about recovery. We knew that intervention that your family has around you in the living room and tells you, hey, you need a 30-day rehab. Like that doesn't always work. And it rarely ever does for just a 30-day, in an intervention, especially and going to rehab. So like there's a lifelong decision you kind of have to make. But I've found along the way that there is sort of a Venn diagram in all humanity where we're all sort of recovering from something. And so I'm unpacking my suitcases along on the ride over here, realizing I've got a closet full of them as we talk. The best part of this podcast is to be able to talk to the experts and to learn from people with lived experience and hear their amazing stories, learn from them what's working, what's not working, how can we create that better future that we always sort of hypothesize about. And I am honored to be joined today with David Marlon, who is the founder and CEO of Vegas Stronger, which is one of the most successful addiction recovery centers in America. So, David, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. It's an honor to be here, Ty, and I look forward to having candid conversations with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. So first of all, I hear Vegas and they say what happens in Vegas, you don't talk about it, but I really want you to talk about it today. So talking a little bit about, what is Vegas Stronger? First of all, let's just go into that.
Well, Vegas Stronger is a nonprofit, basically a clinic, and we offer integrated behavioral health care
Mm-hmm.
to any human who needs it. We have a boxing gym in our core, and we have about 100 people, 80% of which are unhoused, who walk in our golden door each week and begin this process that I call recovery. We have psychiatric prescribers, medical providers. I have just over 80 licensed clinicians, case managers, peer support, yogis, fitness trainers, nutritionists. We just brought on a theater program director. So we have a variety of modalities or directions that we try to
Mm-hmm.
wrap our clients around recovery. The whole thing is wrapped up in what I call trauma-informed, recovery-oriented system of care.
Yeah, I hear several things in there. So you're Vegas Stronger, literally, but you're covering the physical, the mental, the spiritual, and even like your physical health. There's the physical strength training and boxing. I did see a couple of posts. I was really, really curious about that and how that plays a role. And so, is it just? I guess how do you fold in so many different facets of I guess taking care of yourself basically is what this is, right? You're taking care of the many parts of your life to bring it in together to try to make a trajectory for yourself. I've talked to so many your recovery centers that really focus on one thing, where it's like, well, you can't be better without Jesus. Let's pray it away. Over here to this clinic where it's like, well, you actually need some medication. Or in this clinic where it's like, it's mental health and you actually have a dual diagnosis. You kind of incorporate a lot of different things and cover a lot of different areas, which is kind of what I've been looking for and hoping to find that this exists somewhere. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear how you came up with this, I guess the plan to put all these together.
I was talking to a national recovery center expert yesterday, and he was describing me to somebody, and I couldn't help but chuckle. He said, Dave didn't make a big plan and then roll it out. He was building the car while he was driving it. And I thought that was a good analogy, but because we opened up a little intensive outpatient program and we started helping people. And I realized very quickly that a lot of our clients were too hungry to be able to participate in treatment. So I quickly got into the food service business. And then I realized a lot of our clients were having trouble coming to treatment. So we now have a fleet of buses, and I'm now in the transportation business. Um, we I learned because I used to run a commercial treatment center that our underserved have very different needs. And while I used to use like one clinician um, to about a quarter of a case manager, I now need as much case management for these clients as we do need clinical
Mm,
care. So we've built, I have the best case managers in town, and a like a pretty agile army of them, and they're really busy because just about every client who comes in, thinks they're coming in for housing, um, and that they have this sort of anecdotal methamphetamine use, but the issue they come in for is for housing. So our case manager is robust. They were oh, there's so much. We have a peer support team who connects as peers to try to instill hope and let people know that there is a path, even out of long time chronic homelessness. And to me, they're some of my favorites, because they're walking the walk. Although I'm also going to mention that I spent some time homeless. I spent some time, more time than I'd like to admit, where I say my soul was owned by drugs and alcohol. So I'm also a guy in recovery. And, the one thing I'll say to lead you into it is that something my sister always says. She says, I don't know what this recovery cult is that my brother's part of, but if it works for him, it'll work for anybody.
yeah. No, I think the people that have the most passion for recovery seem to be the ones that have had some sort of lived experience in itself. They say that fear, the emotion of fear, you feel that way because you know what's at stake. Like there's something that means to you, and that's why you're feeling fear if you're losing it. So, I feel like the strongest leaders in the recovery field are people who have been in that very same position, found their way out, and they know what's at stake. So they're trying to reach down and help other people and be like, "This is how I did it," opposed to what we might think would be the best case, sort of savior, I guess you'd say, which would be a philanthropic, sort of wealthy person that has no experience but just wants this on their resume. They want to be known for helping the homeless. They want to be known for helping the substance users, and so yeah. For you, because I know that peer recovery specialist is a growing industry, across the U.S. right now, which is great, and that's incredible. But you have to make that decision of saying, okay, well, I'm gonna make a career out of this. I'm going to help other people do what I did and make this my job. This is my full time. So how did that happen for you?
Well, I when I first got clean and sober back in 2005, on my 90-day mark, I opened up a treatment center, and I very quickly started hiring what I was calling house managers, because we grew to 400 beds, so I had a lot of beds running the treatment center, and I had a recovery army of people who were really doing mostly 12 step, but doing the deal, and both well, actually multiple fellowships. I had CMA, NA, Alcoholics Anonymous, but we had a a recovery, meaning true abstinence, and I do want to talk about the SAMHSA definition at later on if we can. But I really found a power in the people who were all in to recovery, and it affected the vibe. And what happens is, while yes, there's this fear you talk about that I have, that most people who are really in recovery have. More importantly, there's a joy that we have, which is being freed from the ultimate bondage, and given a second chance at life that is better than the life we had before. It's just absolutely amazing. I talk about how there's lots of chronic illnesses. You could have heart disease, you could have, um, all kinds of muscular skeletal issues. and you'll go to the doctor and they'll make some repairs and they'll say, great, you were 85% of where you used to be. Recovery is, somebody getting over a chronic deadly illness and then being better than they ever were before. And there's so much joy in that. Not reducing not just the bondage of drugs and alcohol, but the bondage of self.
Mm, that's incredible. And for you yourself, whenever you were homeless and experiencing all that, was that in Vegas as well?
I was unhoused back in New York before I moved to Las Vegas. I worked all through my addiction, and was housed while my addiction progressed.
Okay. How did you, I mean, what is the journey from getting from, living unsheltered in New York and then moving to Vegas and then helping other people get back on their feet?
Well, I'm glad you asked because it kind of weaves into Vegas Stronger and what we are. Um, because I learned in recovery that getting physically stronger, is an integral part. And to me, is I have this vehicle to go through this spiritual experience, and I can make a choice. Do I want to go through this in an old beat up car, or do I want to go through this in a sports car? And so I weaved a fitness program in very early into recovery. Um, I weaved education in, and very early in recovery, um, I was running admissions, and my social worker friend was running the clinical program, and he kept telling me it's not clinically appropriate to treat this one client, or we can't help somebody because it's not clinically appropriate. And I I I couldn't have that. So I went. I'd had an MBA, and I was a business guy in my active youth. Although once I got clean and sober, running a treatment center, I went back and I got a master's in counseling and in community mental health. I then became an addictionologist. I then I became a licensed alcohol drug counselor supervisor. I then added all mental illnesses with a clinical professional counselor. I then added a doctorate in psychology, focused in addiction studies. So to me, just like growing myself physically, I learned that growing myself mentally, it's equally as important, if not. And we encourage all of our clients, as well as all of our staff, to be not just working with the yogis and stretching and getting fit, working with personal trainers and increasing their fitness, working with the nutritionists and changing their diets, but also progressing on education to expand their perspective, their viewpoints, their capability, and their usefulness. So to me, those are two uh, huge pillars of what Vegas Stronger is. It's not just stronger physically;
Yeah.
it's stronger mentally.
So I guess I got to ask, in Vegas, particularly because I've never been there, but how, I've been to several of the larger cities across the U.S. and there is a large population of unsheltered. Sadly, there's not a whole lot of resources that are available. There are quite a few, but not enough to, I guess, to stimmy the problem. But how big is the issue of substance use and being unsheltered in Vegas?
I love this. Thanks for asking. My premise was I assumed they mostly had my disease and I needed to go help them, which is why I opened, Vegas Stronger, treating any human who walks in. And I've now treated over 3,000 clients. Of the 8,000 homeless in Las Vegas, 94% of them have a serious substance use disorder. So I confirm my hypothesis that a lot of this is a drug problem, even though most of them, when we asked, they assured us that drugs and alcohol were not their presenting problem. Um, so, I had a conversation with our prior mayor, And I said, "Hey, I'd like to go into the shelter and I'd just like offer treatment and help people." She said, "David, we've already asked them, and only 15% of them have a drug or alcohol problem." And I kind of like looked at her and I was like, "You asked them?" um, I don't know if you know anybody. Have you ever asked, somebody you love if they have a drug or alcohol problem? And do
Right.
you know what the answer is? So to me, many people have a lack of understanding of the disease of addiction. And, one of the things is because I don't think they're bad people. I think they're
Hmm.
people like me. And I was the last to find out. I was sure that I was hiding a drug and alcohol problem from my family, from my friends, and even my fellow workers. And I was truly the last to find out, as is the case for some of our currently unhoused people, of which there's about 8,000 in Las Vegas. Although my my Venn diagram, it's not just the unhoused. Most of our incarcerated population, I find it's the same issue. So we've expanded, and we're in all the jails every almost daily, doing what we call in reach, trying to connect with people who are in jail because they let me in now, and I go in and I kind of bang the bars, and I ask everybody to kind of come into the main room, and I just say, "Hey, I'm Dave. Can I get a show of hands? Who was drinking or using when you got handcuffed and brought in here?" And it's like everybody raises their hand. And then
Hmm.
I'll ask, I was like, "Who thinks drugs or alcohol rule is related to the reason you're here?" Everybody raises their hand. "Who would like to stop coming here?" Everybody raises their hand. I'm like, "All right, sit down and we're going to have a talk." To me, the population, it's not just the unhoused, but it's also the incarcerated.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so, yeah, you're an interesting guy because you've got 35 years of behavioral health experience now, or over 35 years now, and I think you sort of embody all the things that you just mentioned that you offer at Vegas Stronger. I mean, you've got your own website that I've seen where you do a lot of physical activities, but also talking about mental health issues, and you even ran for city council in Vegas. What was that? 2019, I believe it was. You were on the Ballotpedia. Um, you've really got a heart for leadership. You've really got of leading by example. Um, I'd love to know, as somebody that you yourself had experience, what led to saying, "I'm going to try to run for city council. I'm going to take this leadership position within the city."
Um, it, it's interesting. I was in the Galapagos Islands with my family, and I'm a prayer guy, and I was praying, and I had sold my company about 3 years prior, and I did very well, better than I ever thought I would do, and I was just doing the standard, praying to God and saying, "Hey, what's your will? What is thy will?" And as I hear in my 12-step fellowship, the answer is service. But because I'm fundamentally wired to try to feed Dave. I'm
Mm.
I'm I'm wired to like, what do I get?
Yeah.
I want
Right.
money, I want drugs and
Sure.
alcohol, I want sex. What do I get? And what I've learned in recovery is that the less I grab onto what Dave wants, and the more I relax and I let go of that, and I say, how could I serve? Who could I help? Um, the byproduct of that is true joy, and self-esteem and being useful to my friends. So, I will tell you that this morning I was down on my knees, and when I woke up,
Yeah.
Dave was there saying, I'd rather stay in, have a big breakfast, convince my girl to come back to bed. But I got up and I made coffee, walked the dog, I went for a run, and then rush to work to meet with you at 8 a.m. So there's this push pull that I think many people with a substance use disorder or an addictive personality have. And it's learning to let go of the demand from yourself to feed yourself and to switch that to how could I be of service? And to me, I was in prayer and I said, the ultimate service is really public service. even though I disagree with that. I think the ultimate service you do to your family, but and raising your kids, but but service, public service, it made sense. So I came back, and even though there were 8 candidates who've been running for 2 years for this position, with 90 days before the election, I threw my hat in the ring, and I ran hard for city council, and I lost by 137 votes in my little 90-day sprint, but I knocked the doors. I met all these constituents. I was my eyes were opened to this political realm that I'd been mostly disgusted by, from what I'd read and what I'd heard. But I put my toe in the water, and it's changed me. I appreciate what they do, but I also recognize that us as constituents, we have a regular job to educate them, and say, if 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 you want to come and provide showers and meals and give blankets to the homeless downtown, what's your end goal, and are you actually enabling unhealthy behavior? And so I recognize I have a regular job of talking at the legislature, meeting with our county commissioners or city councilors, communicating with the governor, and you'll probably see if you poke around about me, I have an op-ed that I write on a regular basis. I was in the paper this weekend, and it's been fun because variety of people have been coming into our center being like, hey, I read your article and you're right. I probably shouldn't be delivering sandwiches to people on the street, which makes me feel like a good Christian, but I'm just helping them stay there. So the ultimate is that we all have a responsibility to our community, and however we do that. If it's communicating with our leaders, great. If it's running and becoming with the leaders, great. Let's all be of service to one another.
Absolutely. And that's a great mindset to have, that not being self-serving, because that's our natural state, I think, is that we want, we want to take care of us. And they're like, there's a natural instinct there, but there's also just a selfishness that we sort of fall into. And like you said, you have to make that decision to get up and go on that run, have that walk and talk, prepare to come in and do this interview, which I'm grateful for. Thank you for doing this so early. Do you think that approach is why you have, I think you said, a 95% success rate at Vegas Stronger? Do you think it's because you're implementing that mindset?
Well, first, a technical correction. At 1 year, we have a 77% success rate. And
77.
we determine success is employed, housed, self-reported sobriety, and we confirm it with a urinary analysis. So, and if you go to Vegas Stronger and type outcomes, we track outcomes like we have scientists, so we're emphatic about testing it. And at 77%, it's not perfect, but it's much better than most treatment centers, particularly ones that focused on the unhoused. Is that the reason? It's part of our vibe, but it's not the reason. I think the reason fundamentally is that we have longer treatment episodes. And if you track the data, the number one determinant of successful outcomes is duration of treatment. And we keep our average client for 5.5 months. We have lots of people who come in who were 10 years chronically unhoused, fentanyl dependent, and they're like, all right, I want to get well, maybe a 30-day spin will do it. And my suggestion is to take some breaths, and this is going to be a process. And, that's probably going to be a year. Because we're going to have to get you to think differently, and that doesn't happen quickly. So the primary reason that the Vegas Stronger model is so successful is our longer treatment episodes, and having lots of clients who stay in intensive counseling for over a year. And if you've walked that far into the woods, it's going to take some time to help pull you out of the woods. Although, we have 13 elements, and we've touched on a bunch of them, with the medication-assisted treatment and the counseling and the peer support and the fitness and the nutrition and the housing and encouraging employment and case management. But I find it's different for each person who comes in. And that if I say boxing classes are going to save everybody, I would be, gravely mistaken. They've been great for me, and I love them. And we have a section of our clients who've excelled in those. But I probably have an equal amount. We have this new theater program, and our clients absolutely love it. And we've had a variety of like actors from Hollywood coming in, being guest speakers, and seeing clients process childhood traumas while they're in working a role and doing things in groups that they're like, oh my goodness, I got to go to my primary therapist and go through this. I'm seeing them having these gestalts and make or aha moments where
Hmm.
they're making quantum leaps and improvement in self-awareness and hopefully change. But it's really a multi-tiered process, so we could connect with each human who has come in for help for us. I'm going to mention that last year we had 520 people die from the sun in our streets. This is insane that we are allowing people to bake in the sun in Las Vegas, and we need to be more assertive in getting them off the street. We need to have integrated behavioral health care available for them to get them treated, and we need to be able to get every single one of them in an air-conditioned bed.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said a lot of different things there. One, yeah, that's incredible. The theater program, and you're absolutely right. How to, why do we allow so many people to be in such harsh conditions? And you know, I think, it's similar to why we started this podcast, why we've been on this journey and learning, is that we want to know what it's like to sort of, come at it from being in the shoes of the other person that needs their kind. And it's kind of hard for us to have that empathy if we don't understand what the issues are, then what the stories are of the people that are coming, out of substance use and into recovery. But same thing with the unsheltered, where well, you hear so many times, why don't you just stop using drugs? Why don't you just go get a job? Why don't you just go get go apply for an apartment building or assisted living? And like, they don't listen to the stories or the people because they don't want to, because you've already decided you have all the answers and it's so simple to fix. All they have to do is just one thing.
Yeah, we also make, when you're in a homeless camp, there's a camaraderie. You could usually use drugs with impunity. There's a sense of community, and we make the off ramp to homelessness. Go to the shelter. As soon as you get to almost any shelter in America, they yell at you and they tell you to wait in a long line. They don't treat you with respect in most cases, and we make the off ramp from the homeless camp much harder than the on ramp back into the homeless camp. Oh, there's another person of the opposite sex
Yeah.
there. There's, good drugs there. We can make a cool camp. We need to make the off ramp from homelessness more appealing, which is why we have our golden ticket program and our golden door. And as soon as you walk in our door, we offer you cold water. We offer you food. We're going to help get you clothed. We just need you to meet with a clinician and do a biopsychosocial assessment so we could find out really what you need and then make a treatment plan to have you begin to get well. That often includes an inpatient detoxification as the beginning of this journey. So we got to use some motivational interviewing to get you ready to go through
Hmm.
that physiological separation from the substance. But even doing that, having somebody who's holding your hand and doing it with you, makes it a lot easier than, walking up to a scary hospital and telling people you use heroin or
Yeah.
or coke or whatever your illegal or illicit substance, or if it's not illicit, explaining how much you really drink. um I used to love going to Costco and buying a 30 pack of beer, but because I found that was the right amount for me to lock myself in the garage with. And to me that was like the most normal thing. But I learned one of my first days of rehab, when they said, Dave, how are you an alcoholic? I said, absolutely not. I have a job,
Hmm.
I have a big
Yeah.
house. And they said, "How much do you like to drink?" And I was like, "Ooh, how much do I like drinking? I like a 30 pack of light beer and a quart of Jack." And everybody laughed at my face, and I was like, What's so funny?" That's what I like to drink.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought the the community too, the sense of belonging, that we all have, just as people. A lot of the people that I've talked to that have been successfully in recovery, they say that they don't know that they could have continued to do that. Even when they're in the program, they're doing great. But once they leave the program, it can get a little bit harder because now you're sort of on your own. But what keeps them on track is having a strong support system, having, not everybody has friends or family, but they've found some sort of sense of belonging in the community of the people that were also, on the same track. They were also in recovery even after they left the program and kept coming back. So what happens to the people that go through your program whenever they leave? Are some of them coming back and come in and helping move it forward? I know you have peer support specialists that are there as well.
Yeah, we have an alumni group that's powerful. And they come and volunteer here. They have car washes. We just had a big barbecue at the park. They were all there. So we have an alumni program. We have a graduation ceremony. That's a big deal. And we really take our clients through this continuum of, a lot of counseling, an intensive amount of counseling, and then maybe one time a week, then maybe one time a month, but slowly, um slowly diminishing it, but still maintaining a contact, still doing some drug testing while we're there, so we maintain that sentinel effect for them, because we don't think that's their partner's job. We think, it's our therapeutic environment. It's our clinical job to do. So helping them establish healthy relationships, be whenever possible in recovery oriented environments. We will take most of our clients and move them from a shelter to a sober living, to a transitional living, to independent living. And the clients who stay longer in that sober living environment, they certainly have better outcomes. So we're big supporters, not only of you going to sober living, but then once you're there, working yourself up to manager and being, house manager of your, whatever your environment is, or recovery coordinator, whatever, because once you see your behaviors in your
Mm-hmm.
peers, it's very helpful for you personally to understand that when you start getting ideas of your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing about Vegas is that it's so, I think, because I've never been myself. And I think for people who haven't been, um, you hear the story because it's a big tourist spot, right? So many people come in from around the world and be like, "What is Vegas known for?" Well, your casinos and just having fun, quote unquote, which is a lot of the things you're trying to help people realize. Hey, you might be a little addicted, whether it's to gambling or drinking or the substance use. There's a lot of different things in a lot of different areas that can go. So it seems so unique a problem that you probably have right there concentrated in that one spot, and that you've got so many people that there are so many, addictions that are sort of just flowing into the city that's known as Sin City, right?
There's some unique aspects to Las Vegas. Um, and it's interesting, but when I talk to my rehab owner friends in Salt Lake, in Phoenix, and even Los Angeles, if you track the percentage of people with substance use disorders in the community, we have roughly the similar amounts. That
Really.
we don't have more,
Hmm.
drug addicts than other places statistically. What I have found is that we do have slightly higher acuity,
Mm-hmm.
that I have people, in Phoenix who might be drinking a quart. I have people who are drinking a handle. Um, I've treated many people taking 80 pills a day. And just like the logistics of ingesting 80 pills a day, sounds awful to me. But we get some very high milligrams of opiate on a daily basis, which I think that a lot of Vegas is isolated, partly due to the heat, but we all kind of go to our own houses. You could live in a community and never talk to your neighbors, which may be atypical in other places, uh, due to people working all different shifts. So your neighbor might work grave, you might work swings. So there's some more isolation, and I think that leads to higher acuity levels. And in running a variety of detoxes in our community, I've and when I compare to other markets, I see higher levels of benzodiazepine use. Like, it's like shocking that people could get to these levels, but they do it slowly and gradually. But it makes some of our detoxes gnarly, um,
Yeah.
and challenging. I'll also say that we have a little more of a cash economy than a lot of other
Mhm.
places. So we have a lot of people driving around with cash in their pockets, while just in Los Angeles, it's mostly a credit card economy. There's some interesting factors there. Um, so there's absolutely some unique aspects of Las Vegas, although substance use disorder treatment, which we do at Vegas Stronger using a medical model, we're not so much of a spiritual place, although there is a spirit in here. But we're a medical model. But I think you would find much of the levels of care and the services we deliver very
Mm.
similar to treatment centers you'd find in any city, although we bolt on lots of extras.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a very unique, but it sounds like you're having the same similar issue as most cities, and so
Yeah,
that's a revelation. Wow. You mentioned earlier you wanted to talk about the SAMHSA definition.
my God. Thank you for reminding me. So, I talked about my call to leadership,
Hmm.
and I recognize it's a blessing and a curse. And, I appreciate SAMHSA's well intention in wading into recognizing there is this recovery stuff that you're trying to get your hands on what it is.
Hmm.
And they defined it. And they came up with this SAMHSA definition of recovery that you could Google. I can't quote it, but it basically says it is what you say it is. And that if you personally decide that this is recovery for you, that's what it is. Now, I believe they did grave harm to many people with their all inclusive definition. And I know several treatment centers that were a little more draconian, like mine, and then they embraced the SAMHSA definition and said, hey, if you want to start using cannabis but still say you're in recovery, you could do
Hmm.
that. If your problem was heroin and you want to start drinking alcohol but say you're in recovery, you could do that. If you want to move from injecting heroin to low doses of a prescribed opioid and say you're in recovery, you could do that. And to me, I appreciate their desire to be inclusive, but I am vehemently opposed to a person with a diagnosed substance use disorder opening up the tent and letting the camel's head into the tent.
Yeah.
I like a abstinence from mind altering substance perspective on substance use, and we hold to that here. Um, and I imagine there's no, I actually don't. I'm steadfast and unwavering that at least in our recovery environment, it means what I call real recovery. That if you are diagnosed with a substance use disorder, you should not be using illicit substances. There's a lot of talk nowadays about oh, psychotropics for
Microdosing.
helping, and they're saying, that's wonderful. I'm very apprehensive about it being used for substance use disorders, and we've seen some bad outcomes already, where we were giving ketamine to people, which I think it could be fine for anxiety, for depression, for some PTSD. If you got a substance use disorder, I do not believe that we should be giving you controlled substances to determine on yourself how to parse those out, I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I just recently had an interview with this lady who, oh, I'll go into it, but like she was a foster mom, and one of the children that she had become a foster mother of, his real mother had been addicted to substances, and that's sort of what changed her mind about how we should approach, rather than making substance use a justice involved issue, it's more of a medical or a health related issue. But she's a big supporter in the clinical trials that they're doing with ketamine, and also the microdosing with psychotropics. But she doesn't have any lived experience. And I think it kind of takes all of the different personalities and the people. If you're willing to put energy into recovery, I think we need to be collaborative. But I mean, I would think you would need to listen more to the people that have been there and have experienced that, like yourself. I think you have the most valuable information about what will work and what won't work.
You're very kind. Thank you. There's multiple paths, and to me, we're one path. And if you choose another path and that works for you, rock on. Um, I just know what our path is, and I do protect that. And like drug testing became very unfashionable. A few years ago, and potentially litigious. I still drug test. All employees, all clients, very often. We're very open about it. It's not punitive. And, I've learned a lot of things. Like I used to say when somebody had a positive result in a drug test, I used to say, oh, you have a dirty UA. And we've stopped that. And I don't call people dirty anymore, but I am able to identify a recurrence of the
Hmm.
disease and then come up with a plan to help people when that happens. I don't do it um, as a punitive thing, although I will assure you it does have a sentinel effect that some of my clients who are going through a divorce or a tough time or excuse me, or my employees, and they're saying, maybe they're like, but I do get tested at work, so I'm not gonna do this. And I don't know. I recognize there's a couple sides to this, and this does piss some people off. But this is just our lane. We're a real clean and sober place, and we're encouraging that environment in our staff, and for all of our clients. Which it might be right for you. You might want to choose a different lane.
Hmm.
We hope you choose ours.
So yeah, and that leads perfectly into my last question. I always ask guests at the end of the show, and I think you've sort of built yours, and we've been talking about it the entire time. But your answer to this, but going back to with all of your experience, both professionally and in life, the work that you're doing, what you've seen, the stories you've heard, the lives you've helped, what is a long-term solution? And I think I'll be more specific because I think Vegas Stronger is a solution in general for recovery and what you built there. I love that you cover it from so many different angles and help them focus on serving others as well. But for those guys, let's go back to when you're going into, I think it was the jails that you were going into, and you asked those guys, okay, who in here thinks that your substance use has led you to going in, and how many of you are done coming in here? And then you get to work. What is your long-term solution for those guys? What is it that you say to them?
I think America has attempted to solve the substance or the addiction crisis with an incarceration answer. And I do think that is flawed. Um, I think the answer for a person with substance use disorder is behavioral health care treatment to get them into recovery. So what we do is in reach, where we're trying to connect on a regular basis with the people who are incarcerated. So when they do get out, we have a peer support person pick them up. So instead of you leaving out the back door at 1 a.m. and maybe giving you $20, just a recipe for recidivism. Instead, we pick you up and when have a guy with lived experience drive or gal drive you to our treatment center and say, hey, today's your first day out of jail. I know you probably want to go see your partner. You want to go do a lot of things, but let's do this. Could we, have a good meal. Let's, have some cold water. Do you need some fresh clothes? Let's get you some clothes. Let's have you sit with a clinician and let's make a treatment plan how you could get well and not keep repeating this. So I really think strong in reach and then a transition right into treatment for people who were incarcerated due to a substance use disorder or to a mental illness. We didn't talk a lot about mental illnesses, but I find the path, it's almost the same. If you have a psychotic disorder or schizophrenia or severe bipolar that's brought you to homelessness or to incarceration, I think you need to, when you leave, you need to go through a clinical process. You need to connect with a psychiatric prescriber who's going to work to get your dose right. We do a lot of injectable medications, so we take your medication compliance off the table. The case manager is going to schedule you to come in each month, and we're going to give you your meds with an injection. So a stronger medication management for the people with serious mental illnesses, but as well as counseling, peer support, case management, nutrition, fitness, all the things we do, that really works for them as well. So I'm not telling you everybody here at Vegas Stronger has a substance use disorder like I have. It's mental illness as well, but I really think a pathway out of the jails and into recovery and out of the streets and into recovery is the way out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, David. If somebody wants to find out more about Vegas Stronger or to keep up with you, where would they go for that?
Please check out vegasstronger.org. Plus, Dave Marlon, I'm on all the socials. I'm an avid TikToker, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. Reach out to me on any of those platforms. I reply to every email every single day within 24 hours.
That's incredible. David, thank you so much, for the work you're doing, but also for sitting here this morning and talking with me and to help educate, our audience and hopefully reach a larger amount of people to understand the system and what's needed and like your approach to recovery, period. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ty. I appreciate this platform and your empathetic viewpoint.
Thank you. Yeah, so much. I think that's what we're going to have a sustainable future, or else we're just going to alienate everyone and we're not going to fix any of our problems. But yeah, thank you this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find us on all the audio podcast platforms from Spotify, Apple, iHeart, on and on and on. Wherever you find your podcast, that's where we are, and vice versa. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, you can find us on YouTube. The biggest thing you can do to help us, to grow this, I always talk about, subscriptions are great. Comments are great, but the best thing that you can do is share this episode with someone. If you heard Dave here say something or talk about something, you're like, I know who needs to hear this. Maybe it's one of the policymakers in your state. Maybe it's somebody that's in recovery right now, or somebody that needs recovery, or somebody that is trying to help be a support system for someone in recovery. Share this episode with them. It is the best way to help that message reach the people that need to hear it. But it also grows the show. And the worst thing that can happen is they won't listen to it. The best thing that can happen is that it'll change their life. So I appreciate you for being here. I appreciate Dave for being an awesome guest and for educating us here today. And I look forward to keeping up with Vegas Stronger and you on all your many social media platforms. And with that, thank you again. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Share this now.
Share it now. Yeah.